Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is my wonderful Period 1 APBio class. Say hi.
Hi.
You guys sound like death warmed over. So we are on chapter 27, flowering plants, and we're going to focus on reproduction. And blue person, talk about the significance of this picture and what you think is going on. Go ahead.
They just like
Okay, now, do you know, looking at this flower, which parts are the male parts and which parts are the female parts? In kindergarten? All right. This part right here, you know what part that is? That looks really inappropriate, but do you know what part that is? The female part, yeah. This right here, that right there is the sticky stigma. This is the style, and then down at the base of this will be the ovary. It goes stigma. I've never drawn in this picture before, and there's probably a reason why. It goes stigma, style, and ovary at the base, okay? And then all of these parts right here, okay? Another name for this is the female part is called the pistil. It's kind of an old school name. It's made out of carpels. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And all of these parts right here are male. And what this part right here is called the anther on each one, and this is the filament that supports that anther. And what's inside the anther? It's the male part. What do you call plant sperm? Pollen. Yeah. Plant sperm is equal to pollen. So pollen is got to get from the male parts to the female parts. And there, in any kind of plant, you have that, if you want to have sexual reproduction, that's got to take place. It could potentially on lower plants, you could have that happen with water. Plants that have flowers like this, it could be wind, or it could be wind pollinated or animal pollinated. Most flowers are animal pollinated. It could be a bee. The bee, understanding about bees is huge. This is like a $10 billion industry dependent upon bees. And if I haven't mentioned it before, and I'm almost sure that I have, I talked to you about colony collapse disorder. And that's a real concern. And pay attention to it in the news, because the two things that are going to be concerning to you as you grow older, the number one concern is probably going to be something you drink every day and need, and what's that? Water. Yeah, access to water is a huge deal, okay? And then our food, and pollinating our food. And we depend on animals to do that for us. And so if the bees, and they are, colony collapse disorder is a real concern, because there's a mite that grows on the bees and it destroys them. And there are literally people whose job it is, they drive bee colonies around. You want to make some money? Start a bee farm, okay? And these people will drive during certain seasons. They'll drive all night. They'll take their bees, unload them, let them pollinate their fields, pack them up, and drive. And they pay bucks for that, to get that to happen. Make a big bucks, okay, for them to pollinate it. So this part right here, the female is called the pistil, and the male part altogether is called the stamen. So repeat after me. The female picks up the pistil, and says stamen. Okay, so do that with me. The female picks up the pistil and says stamen. All right, and so this bee is helping that process to go along. Now, we have already talked about alternation of generations, so Slate, could you review that real quick, please?
Okay. So we have and then it
All right. Now, when you do meiosis, if you're a plant who makes only one type of spore, that's called homospores. That makes sense, right? Same spore. Now that one spore will grow into one gametophyte, it still needs to make two types of gametes, right? The male and the female. But if there are two types of spores, if there's a female spore and a male spore, then you're not homosporous, you're heterosporous. And if you're heterosporous, then you'll make two types of gametophytes. Does that make sense? And then one will make the sperm and one will make the egg. Now, if we look here, this is a fern, and ferns are homosporous. They make one type of haploid spore. That spore develops into a gametophyte. That gametophyte, you could see it with your naked eye, but it is very tiny, looks like a little green heart. And because it's green, you know that this gametophyte can do what process? Photosynthesis. And there's this region right here is called the antheridia. This region right here is called the archegonia. And what happens is the sperm come out of the base of the heart, the pointy part of the heart, and they swim up here to the archegonia and they fertilize the egg, forming a diploid zygote. And here is your sporophyte that's growing up out of it. Now, they are highly dependent on making sure that their environment is wet, because this will dry out, right, if it's not in a moist environment. So those organisms that are able to protect that gametophyte, that are able to protect the embryo, have an advantage. And so you can take a step up and you have seed plants and things like gymnosperms. These are Christmas trees and Hanukkah bushes. And we're going through a little evolution of that, which we've done before. These are things that have cones. And they have what's called naked seeds because they have no fruit that develops around their seeds. And if you've had pine nuts, then you're eating little pine tree babies, okay? Tasty in a salad. But there's no fruit around them. They just sit naked out on those cones, and the cones get released and fall to the ground. An organism can eat it, some squirrel or whatever, and take it to a distant area, and that's how it's going to get dispersed. Yes?
So, this might sound funny, but if you kick a pine cone, then you're helping it, right?
Yeah, sure. You kick that pine cone. Now, some trees have male pine cones and female pine cones on the same tree. Some trees are just male pine trees. Some might be a female gymnosperm. So it varies. You don't need to learn all of that. I just want you to know that there are various ways of getting through the reproductive process. We're talking about angiosperms, and angiosperms are flowering plants. And so we're going to form, there are going to be heterosporous for sure. There's a microspore and a megaspore. Which one do you think is male and which one do you think is female? Mega is female. Yeah, the megaspore is the female and the microspore is the male. And the microspore, remember, these are going to be haploid structures because you just underwent meiosis. The microspore will develop into the male gametophyte, which will eventually become the pollen grain, and the megaspore will develop into the female gametophyte. Now, we have already talked about mitosis and meiosis, yes? Okay, and do you remember we talked about, I talked about briefly spermatogenesis and oogenesis, right? And you remember on spermatogenesis, all four sperm would develop into mature sperm, okay? Or spermatids would develop into the mature sperm. And then in oogenesis, do you remember how we had unequal division of the cytoplasm? And so there are polar bodies and then one large. Similar is going to go on here. Similar process. And this is, again, all your nutrients in one basket. One of the megaspores will actually develop into the female gametophyte, and I'll show you a little bit about that. Then again, they have to come together through fertilization, seed, mitosis, and make your flower. Now, your flower parts here, you just want to be familiar in case they use it as support material. And I would like, not it. I would like whoever won the not itedness, give them please a tour of the flower. Go ahead.
So here we have a flower, and then the stem, Yeah, stamen is the
Okay, this right here that looks like a little eye in the middle, it's going to undergo mitosis at this point because it's a haploid structure, and it's going to become the female gametophyte. And how this is ultimately is going to look is like this. And the female gamete right here, it's right there. It's going to be this center cell at the bottom. Okay, and I'll show you more about that as, you know, in a later picture, but I just wanted to show you eventually you're going to see the female gamete is here. Now the pollen, you could do self-fertilization, though some plants have evolved to prevent self-fertilization. Why would that be adaptive to prevent self-fertilization? Well, yeah, mutations could accrue, you're right, but let's think of what, yes?
Don't they usually have shorter lifespans if they're like...
Okay, but we're making it,
Or
think, not so much on the negative. Why would it be an advantage to prevent self-fertilization? Not because something bad's going to happen, yes?
Self-fertilization prevents variation.
It prevents variation, good. So by forcing you not to reproduce with yourself, you're increasing the odds that you're going to pick up a good gene from some other plant. So, but what's going to happen is this pollen that gets released, let's say on another one, it's going to land on this sticky stigma. And if you think about us, okay, as humans, and kind of try to apply it, the sperm, right, has to swim its way to the egg in animals, right, in internal fertilization. And what happens here is the pollen, just like all the sperm are not going to hit the mark, right? Only one sperm is going to fertilize that egg. But you could have millions of sperm all making the effort to do that, yes? And so what happens here is pollen will land on this sticky stigma, and they will start growing pollen tubes. And they're all racing to be the first one to get to that egg. And it's the one that comes around here and gets together with that gamete. It's going to form that diploid zygote right here. And what you're going to end up having is a seed coat start to develop here, and then this ovary becomes the fruit around it. Okay? Stigma-style ovary. The ovary becomes the fruit. All right? So on your notes, you have a diploid sporophyte is dominant and bears the flowers. And flower produces two types of spores. Flowering plants produce two types of spores. They're heterosporous by meiosis. The haploid microspore undergoes mitosis and becomes what? Pollen. And pollen is the male gametophyte. And the haploid megaspore undergoes mitosis and becomes the embryo sac, which is the female gametophyte, which resides within an ovule that sits in the ovary, in the house that Jack built. I'm going to show you some pictures of that in just a second. The haploid megaspore undergoes mitosis and becomes the embryo sac, which is the female gametophyte, which resides within the ovule that sits in the ovary. All right, pollen fertilizes the egg within the embryo sac in the ovule and becomes a zygote within the seed. The ovary will become the what? What will the ovary become? Fruit. Okay, and adapted for land-based existence because the female gametophytes develop within the sporophyte. Think about that for a minute. The female gametophyte develops within the sporophyte. Where's the female gametophyte? Right in the what? Center in here, right? And it's developing within the sporophyte. Okay, it's protected against desiccation. Protected against desiccation. Okay, well, I'm just reminding you, gymnosperms, it's also protected within the female, but here, ferns, it's separate from the fern. Okay, this gametophyte has both the male and the female parts. It's out on its own. It's got to make its own sugars. It's not protected. If it dries out, it's dead. Okay, so here in our flowers, it's protected against desiccation. The male gametophytes are not released until they develop a thick wall. And the male gametophyte is carried by, and how is it? How is the pollen carried? By what or what? Two things. Wind or animals. Good, Maria. Wind or animals, not water. The pollen tube provides passageway for sperm to egg. And the zygote is protected within the seed until favorable conditions for germination. The zygote is protected within the seed until favorable conditions. Okay, now I need us to review. Whoever did the tour of the flower, I would like the other bio buddy just to do a little reminder about monocots and eudicots. Go ahead.
Monocots, like and then monocots, have flowers, but also have three flowers, and then in the monocots, those are very
Do it. Did you call it? Did you call it?
I'm so tired.
Oh, those are dents.
Oh my god.
Oh, even. So, winner, you choose if you're going to be the quiz master or the quizzy. Decide.
I'm the quizzy.
Okay, and quizzer, you're going to name a letter, and the quizzy has to tell you what it is and any role that it plays, anything it knows. All right, that's good. All right, so just showing you a few variations. Oh, do you want to try to answer this? You're yourself. So take a look at it.
I see things running in my
What are the S's and the P's? Sepals and petals. It's too late now.
Changes everything.
Oh, good job, Anish. Okay, let's try again.
Can you explain?
Okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
Get it right.
Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, I thought you understood. What do we know about monocots? Flower parts in what? Threes? What do eudicots have? Flower parts in fours and fives. So that I saw that there was sepal 1, sepal 2, sepal 3, petal 1, petal 2, petal 3. I went with monocots.
How
Yes.
do you differentiate between a petal and a sepal?
Now, usually sepals are green and enclose the petal. So this one, I mean, you'd have to be somebody who just knew that. And they're not going to ever expect you to know that on the AP exam. Only reason I thought you could answer the question is because they were actually numbered. It's because that silly thing, they weren't numbered. Now it seems easy, huh? So does she love me or she loves me not? She loves me, she loves me not. She loves me, she loves me not. She loves me. Yay! Okay.
Wait, 0? Yeah, it's like 0.
Yes?
Then you just destroyed the roads.
Oh, yes, you did. I'm sorry. Yay. All right. Now, you have seen oranges, right, where it has sections. Okay, so what you're looking at is there's options where you have, here's the stigma you're not seeing in this picture, stigma, style, and here's the ovary. And inside here are the ovules, and inside the ovules would be the female gametophyte sitting inside that ovule. In this case, here we have stigma, style, ovary. It's actually sections, fused carpels together, and each one of those carpels has ovules in it, and that's the sections that you would see in an orange. Okay, it's like several different, it's kind of like you're taking several of these bases and it's in sections. And those are the sections you pull apart when you eat an orange. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so each of those seeds that are developing within that ovule inside each of those sections. Okay, now this part is the mini-me part. I'm just letting you know. Structures and flowers, you can talk about having a complete or an incomplete flower. Slate, explain the difference between a complete and an incomplete flower. Blue, you talk about sex and plants. Okay, so this is sexuality in the flower. Okay, so a perfect flower has male parts and female parts. An imperfect flower has only one or the other. Okay, now this is sexuality in a plant. Whose turn is it? Slate or blue?
Slate.
Slate, go ahead.
Mono.
Monoecious. Monoecious, dioecious. So if it's monoecious, you only need one plant and you get both male and female flowers on it. If it's dioecious, there's a whole plant that's male and a whole plant that's female. They will not have, you don't have to memorize these anymore, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm just exposing this to you as to show you variations and different adaptations some plants might have. Okay, that's okay. We're going to go past that because I don't have you memorize that anymore. We have reviewed, okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Okay, we've seen this part before. Here's the diploid sporophyte. This is the anther supported by the filament, and it's going to generate your microspore for you inside of it, which is going to develop into your pollen, right? And then here, it's kind of small, you can't see. I have a bigger picture for you in a minute. This whole thing is called an ovary. This section right inside of here is the ovule, and inside of it, you have your megaspore, which is going to develop into your female gametophyte. Here you can start to see some of the pollen, this pollen tube growing down in order to fertilize. Now, here, these are just showing you anthers that are open, releasing their pollen. Inside, at the top of the anther, there are sections here, each of these releasing pollen. When it releases the pollen, do you remember I said it has to have that tube that grows down? There is a nucleus whose job it is, there's actually 3 nuclei total in your sperm. One nucleus, its job, that cell, is to build the tube. One is going to actually fertilize the egg, and a third is going to fertilize the food source. The food source is actually triploid. Like the plant is diploid, but the food is triploid. If that triploid, it's called endosperm, if that triploid endosperm moves into one seed leaf, it's going to be called a monocot. If that triploid endosperm moves into 2 seed leaves, it's going to be called a eudicot. Okay, that's where it comes from. Right? Continuing on, this is just showing you close-ups of pollen and a plant releasing pollen. Okay, this is showing you the megaspore mother cell. Okay, and here we have 4 megaspores. But do you remember what I told you? Just like when we do oogenesis, how we have the 3 polar bodies, right, that degenerate, and we just have one that moves on. So here's the one functional megaspore that's going to move on. Okay, now here's our stigma, style, and ovary. Within this ovary, in this picture, they're showing you a couple of ovules. Inside this ovule that you have right here, you're going to be undergoing meiosis to make your spores. 3 degenerate, 1 megaspore. It's going to undergo mitosis. And so if you're 1 cell and you undergo mitosis once, you'll have how many cells? 2. Then they all undergo mitosis. Now you have 4. And then 1 more time and you have 8. Okay? So look right here. When they do cytokinesis, they've done a bunch of mitosis to make the female gametophyte. The female gametophyte is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cells. So there was no cytokinesis here. So it has 2 nuclei. So this center part right here is already diploid. Remember I told you there's going to be 3 sperm. 1 builds the tube. 1 is going to come right here and fertilize the egg. Now this egg will be diploid. 1 is going to be right here, and then you'll have triploid endosperm. This becomes the food for the developing baby. It's either going to go into 1 seed leaf, MBA, monocot, or 2 seed leaves, MBA, dicot. Angiosperms have what's called double fertilization. You have a sperm that fertilizes the food and a sperm that fertilizes to form the diploid zygote. Got it?
Got it. Oh, gosh.
Okay. Whoever is not it, pass or play. You're going first on the flower. You're the first flower. Explain what you see here in this picture. Try to put it out in your own words. Go.
So it makes like, so it goes 2, and then it goes 4, and then it makes 3. So yeah, so it undergoes 3 times, and then you go undergo.
Okay, now, did you get that? Now, if you look right here, I'm going into that female gametophyte. So there are actually 3 cells here, and 1 that doesn't undergo cytokinesis. So it is 2N up here. This right here is going to be the actual gamete. So one of the fertilization is going to be here, and 1 is going to be here. That will be the triploid endosperm. This will be the developing baby. Okay, let's get a little bit caught up on our notes, and then I'll show you flower number 2 person. You're coming up in just a minute. So going to flowers, adaptations. It produces spores. It protects gametophytes. It attracts pollinators. and it produces fruit. Did you get all those? Alpha and beta is good. Okay, go to flower structure. So you can see I made some things minimal. Sepals are usually what? Green, and they protect the bud. Petals attract flowers unless it's windblown. The stamen is the what part? Male part. The anther contains the pollen. Good. The carpel, another name is pistil, and that's going to be the what part? Female. The sticky stigma, the pollen lands here. Then the style is supportive. The ovary contains one or more ovules. Then I just mini-me'd on the variations so you know that there's more than one way to skin this cat. Okay. Life cycle in detail. The development of the male gametophyte in pollen sacs of anther. A microspore mother cell undergoes meiosis to produce how many microspores? 4, each which develop into the gametophytes, the pollen grains. Whereas for the female, the female, in an ovule within an ovary. So it goes ovary and then what? Ovule, and then within that ovule, okay, a megaspore mother cell undergoes meiosis to produce 4 megaspores. How many of the megaspores will go on to the next step? 1. One of the megaspores becomes the embryo sac. And then I gave you the little reminder there. Now, development of the new sporophyte. Pollen grain germinates and a tube cell nucleus will produce the pollen tube that grows down through the style and to the embryo sac in the ovary. Double fertilization. One sperm will fertilize the egg. One sperm will fertilize the egg. And one sperm will join with polar nuclei to produce 3N endosperm. Endosperm. Yes?
What would happen if a plant was pollinated with the pollen from another plant species?
Okay, so let's talk about that. What would happen if it was pollinated by a different plant species? So you know when the sperm meets up with the egg, we've talked about the importance of something that starts with an H, something pairs. Homologous pairs. So if the if it's possible that they would not be able to form those homologous pairs, just like in animals, you know, you could say, what if a goat has sex with a dog? Okay. I really wish I had a goat. Anyway, they don't usually form the homologous pair, so therefore, once the sperm fertilizes the egg, you can't really do mitosis well to begin development. But if they're similar enough, you might be able to form a hybrid and it'll be okay as long as they can reform the homologous pairs and there's enough similarities there. Yeah. Okay. Or if they undergo spontaneous, remember we talked about these are ways to get variations. Did we talk about allopatrics? Yeah, we did. Allopatric speciation. And so what could happen is each of those chromosomes could double, do mitosis, and then they would make their own homologous pair. They'd be exactly identical, but they would make their own homologous pair. All right. Okay, so coming back here. So one sperm will fertilize the egg. One sperm will produce a 3N endosperm. These are nutrients like yolk in an egg. You know when you crack open an egg and you look at the dark yellow yolk that's not the baby chick, right? That's the food for the baby.
Oh.
Yeah. If you want to actually see you eat unfertilized eggs. Unless you have hens and you collect eggs at home and you have a rooster. Let me tell you, I did, growing up. So it'd be a real bummer if you're watching your dad make breakfast and somebody didn't gather the eggs right and they crack it and this baby chick goes into the pan and you're like, I'll have cereal. But what the actual baby is, and you should look to see your eggs that you buy at the store unfertilized, crack open an egg, okay, and look at the yolk, and sitting on the yolk will be a tiny little white disc. I'm not talking about the stuff when you scramble eggs where it's kind of slimy white and it like doesn't go in well to the when you're scrambling. Those are suspensory ligaments, so as the chick turns the egg, or not the chick, the mother hen turns the egg, it keeps the baby suspended up in that egg. That's what those are. But crack open the egg and look on, you'll see a tiny little disc sitting on the yellow yolk. That's the actual gamete. The big yellow part of that's the food for the developing chick. Okay, because they don't have a placenta, right? There's nothing for them to gain nutrients from. So they gain all their nutrients from the yellow yolk part. Okay, so 3 in endosperm, nutrients like the yolk, which will become the cotyledons. A mature seed has 3 parts. It has a seed coat, stored food, and an embryo. Seed coat, stored food, and an embryo. Okay, so what are we looking at here? These are 2 pollen. We have 2 pollen that have land on here. They're each trying to build a tube nucleus. This guy's winning out. Okay, and then the double fertilization, you're going to fertilize the egg, and you're going to fertilize the polar nuclei to form the triploid endosperm. Okay, so flower 1, you already went. Flower 2, it's your turn. I did a little drawing. You may or may not like it. Just appreciate it and explain what you see. Go ahead.
So the male gametophyte will go, and then it'll
It's like deformed little legs down all around.
and then it'll fertilize that, and then it'll fertilize something else. The middle, let's say,
This is not a chocolate chip cookie. These are the 3 nuclei.
That's
Yeah, she's like, so you can see the 3 eggs.
okay. So there's food, and then there's like 2
Okay,
fertilizers.
what did I do? Oh yeah. You know what? I wrote it and then turned it into letters so it couldn't read my writing. Yeah, that's supposed to say female gametophyte, not gametophyticity. All right, let's see how we do. What is gibberellin? Let's see if we can remember.
The hormone.
Yes. Party hormone. What does it do? Breaks seed and bud dormancy. Makes the plant grow taller. Okay. Good. What is senescence?
That's the death of cells.
Aging. Yes. Good. Oh, all students have finished? Oh.
I knew it, Jake. I shrugged off.
Thank you.
Shrugged off? Okay, good. Most of you got that. What did people say? No. No. I just say no to you. Guys, do you see that we're gonna have like a whole day to like review? No, we're finishing chapter 27 today. We're finishing early. And I have us doing our lab on Thursday, right? And then Monday would be finish chapter 27. We're gonna be done today. And then you just have to review, and then your test is on Wednesday. Yay. Yeah, close. No. What's the microspore gonna be? The male gametophyte. Okay, some of you picked that for the food. Microspore becomes the male gametophyte. Yay! Back to one. Yes, you were first again.
How do you know?
I thought you said Google dominance, not apical dominance. Google dominance.
Harry, yeah, I didn't mean it.
Two.
What's the record?
This semester, that might be it. I thought a 7th period when we did one.
No, we got like.
Yeah.
What?
No.
Everything else is like
It's literally
The key thing is what is it? A, stigma. Sticky stigma. Oh,
Yo, we're balling.
free. Call us.
Yo, I hope there's another one.
Here we go now. Here we go now. Will it be 4? So proud. No, you were just on top of things today. Okay. All right. I need to add a little bit here at the bottom. I don't know why I don't have a picture for this. Okay, cross-pollination. Wind pollination, some angiosperms, grasses and grains, and gymnosperms. Animal pollination. Most angiosperms use, like insects. Coevolution, plants and their pollinators. Plants and their pollinators. I don't have a picture about that. I guess I did it. Plants and their pollinators. Plants who have specific pollinators to produce more seeds. If you have a specific pollinator, you usually produce more seeds. Pollinators are able to find food from the flower. They are helping to pollinate. Pollinators are able to find food from the flower. They are helping to pollinate. Blue, could you listen as Slate gives you the bee example there? Go ahead.
okay. Bee pollinated objects tend to be yellow or white. You can see these colors. Also, see these characteristics. There's a concern about
All right. Your last section here, asexual reproductive strategies. It's defined as production of an offspring from a single parent. And we call it a what? Starts with a C. Clone. Yeah. Production of offspring from a single parent, and it's called a clone. This can be adaptive when a plant is well adapted to a particular environment. Well adapted to a particular environment, and genetic variations are not an apparent necessity. Here's the GoPro strawberry plant. So stolons, we looked at this before. These are horizontal stems. And if they just get, those horizontal stems get covered by any kind of dirt, then another strawberry plant will develop. Rhizomes are underground stems that produce new plants. In case you were curious, that works for white potatoes, but not sweet potatoes. Just letting you know. I'm sure that'll be on the AP exam. Yes? Adaptive. Or 2 on asexual? Rhizomes is underground. Yeah. And then your last little bit here are tissue cultures. And it's defined as plant propagation done in a lab under sterile conditions to avoid pathogens that can come with cuttings. So here's a cutting where you go to one plant and you're cutting it off of it, but from that cutting you can end up pick up things from the environment. So what they'll do is this is our corn today, and this is ancestral corn. Okay, quite different. Okay, this one, then this is called what kind of selection if we've changed it, if man has changed it? Artificial selection. Gan, give me another name. Give me another name. There are 3 kinds. Directional. Yeah, directional selection in order to increase this. Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, artificial selection's right here on the slide. I didn't even notice. Okay, so when you do plant tissue cultures in the lab, what they'll do is they'll take a single plant and they can get cells from it. Those cells, like stem cells in our bone marrow, they're called totipotent. When a sperm first fertilizes an egg for a short amount of time, that's totipotent. That's how you can get identical twins. And then they can just keep growing them up in the labs from that one parent of exactly what they genetically engineered it potentially to do or be able to produce. So totipotency in plants, the ability of an entire plant to develop from individual plant cells. They usually use meristematic tissue and combinations of what 2 hormones? Auxin and cytokinin, which we already know and love. Uses to produce plants like bananas that are sterile. So here's an example of some tissue culture in plants. Okay, that are sterile or for plant conservation. And here, this is just showing you the ones on the right have been genetically engineered to be resistant to a pest. The one on the left is not. Here's some other genetically engineered plants. This one is intolerant to salt. This one can handle salt. And then from these cultures, it allows scientists to extract chemicals, secondary metabolites from plant cells that may be products of genetic modifications. These metabolites can be used in medical treatments. Medical treatments. What are you all doing? Oh. Medical treatments. All right, guys, go for 5. Guys, you're done with all your content for your next test. What's today? Today's Tuesday. You have a week of no new content. Your test is a week from tomorrow. You're welcome. Thank you for saying thank you. Well, Monday I had finished chapter 27 and review, so we're done with chapter 27. Whole class period. This crazy thing. Okay, listen to me. The embryo can't eat the fruit because the fruit is outside of the seed. You with me on that? So he can't like jump out of his seed and go eat a little of the fruit and then jump back into the seed, right? Okay. So all of you picked A, 11 of you. Way to go, varsity. Yeah. Also, oh good, nobody picked D. Team 1, did you leave your lab over here? Somebody from Team 1?
That's her name on it.
That's why we were going to give up. Oh my gosh. Plant tissue culture takes advantage of differences in flower structure? Really? Sexual reproduction? Tissue culture is asexual. C, gravitropism. Well, why'd you pick that? Roots grow down, shoots grow up. Phototropism, grow towards the light, you asexual thing, you.
Wait, it produced the...
Let's go, varsity.
It's Meiosis records.
Whoa! Damn it, Katie. The end. Yay! Okay, review. Have a piece of toast. You're super smart.